All right, everybody, let's get started. Welcome to another episode of the Disciple Standard Podcast. We're glad that you've joined us. Today, we're going to talk about something important, taking gospel-sized imperfect action. We've got an update. 10 new disciples have joined us this week. And then, boy, I think it's one of the best interviews we've ever had with Josh Sackrowitz. You don't want to miss it. Anyway, I'm excited to get started. I hope you are too. Let's get going. Okay, everybody, for the topic today, here's how I want to get into it. We have a number of slogans that we use. We talked about this last week. Slogans like these: disciples make disciples. You see it behind me. A place to belong. Sin, salvation, service. We're all about the gospel. From the harvest, for the harvest. Anyone who comes from the harvest, who comes to Christ, what we want to do is we want to turn them around and send them in for the harvest. Each one reach one. Go slow to go fast. Go deep to go wide. That was our episode last week. If you didn't hear it, encourage you to go listen. 168, that's the number of hours in a week. Too much of modern church is just 1 hour a week. We got to take back every hour of the week. Helping ordinary people live extraordinary lives. Our segment each time is Ordinary People. Taking gospel-sized imperfect action. 5 plus 2 times J is greater than 5,000. We've got to know Jesus, make Jesus known, live a Jesus life, rooted in the gospel, growing disciples, planting and renewing churches. These are slogans that we use here at the Disciple Standard. And today, I'd like to get into this one, taking gospel-sized imperfect action. Boy, I think this is so important. Maybe this is meant to be a little provocative, but I think too much of the church is just gotten stuck, like we're immobilized. We don't know what to do, and we almost think to ourselves, like, I can't do anything till I know I'm gonna do it just right. And here's one of the things that we're encouraging: no. It's time to move. We can't stay where we're at. We gotta go, and because we've got the gospel. We've got to take gospel-sized imperfect action. Anyway, Jake, there's a way that I want to get into this topic, and that is to just talk about the state of the modern church and why we can't stay here. Things aren't, it's not such that we can just hold pat. The church can't do that. We've got to do something. And here, let's get into this. First of all, I just want to talk about, and I think everyone senses this. If you're part of a church, I know you sense this, and maybe you even know it. This is an article from March of just this last year. The U.S. church membership falls below the majority for the first time. And this is from Gallup, and they have done polls now for the longest period of time about church membership among United States adults. And they just ask a simple question when they polled people. The question is this: do you happen to be a member of a church, synagogue, or mosque? So it's not just Christian, but it gives an indication because the United States is really a majority Christian nation. So they're just asking adults, do you happen to be a member of a church, synagogue, or mosque? And now, Jake, if you just throw the graphic on the screen, maybe you've done it already, but if you look at this, pretty much since they started asking the questions, the 40s, the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, even into the 90s, pretty much 70% of people who responded said, yes, I'm a member of a church, synagogue, or mosque. But then here in the 2000s, just been the last 20 years, all of a sudden you just see it's starting to just fall down that curve. First down into the 60s, then down into the 50s. And now for the first time, and this is the headline just last year, below 50% in the nation for the first time. In fact, 47% said that they happened to be a member of a church, synagogue, or mosque. So something's happened. It's just been in the last 20 years, basically 20, 25 years, but a profound change where all of a sudden you can just see the church membership. The trend is non-mistakable. And maybe you can show this graphic as well, Jake. You can track that by generation. And so Gallup sections out 4 generations: the traditionalists, those born before 1946, and then the baby boomers, and then Generation X, and then the millennials. And you'll see, I thought this was interesting. In each one of the generations, there's been about the same amount of decline. 11% change, a 9% change, a 12% change. But here's the difference. If you look from one generation to the next, you can see that something's happening. The oldest generation, the traditionalists, still, the vast majority are a member of a church, synagogue, or mosque. But as you go, and it's just predictable, the traditionalists are the highest, then the baby boomers, then Generation X, then the millennials. And you can just see what's going to happen. And it's a way of even peering into the future. This number, which stands at 47% now, those who say they happen to be a member, is going to keep on declining. I wonder, as you hear these statistics, Jake, what goes through your mind?
We talked about it a little bit in our staff meeting today. And I know before the episode we were talking and stuff like that. And one of the things that I said, that just seeing it charted out kind of really put it into perspective. And I was just thinking the same thing. Like, it's one thing to see it horizontally through the years, right? The 98 to 2000 range, and then 2008 to 2010 range. But seeing it generationally, I didn't even think about it until as we were talking now. And man, it's very stark. It's like jarring almost.
Yeah.
How much it's dropping.
You can say, this is the provocative thing I'm trying to say, and the show at least means to be provocative. Hey, wake up. What's going on in the church, broadly speaking, in the United States now, isn't working. And to think, if we could just go back to the good old days, this legacy modern system isn't working. Now, another thing that's worth talking about, we know that, just in the last 20, 25 years, something has changed and something's not working. There's also this new factor, COVID. And there was an article that was published at the Institute for Family Studies just very recent, a couple weeks ago. And it really caught my attention because they've tracked a church attendance in COVID times. And so you could just, here's a slide about regular church attendance declining during COVID-19. And you can just track it from 2019, 2020, 2021. And they tracked, those who attend more regularly, at least once or twice per month, those who say they only attend a few times a year, and then those who would respond and say they never or seldom go. So you can see among those who were more regular, those that attended at least once or twice a month, that you've had a decline from 34% of respondents who said, yeah, we attend once or twice or more a month, down to now only 28% of people will say they attend, regularly, once or twice at least per month. And then even those who just would go a few times a year, this is probably your Christmas and Easter crowd, even there's been a tangible decline there just in the last 3 years. But now, those who said we never or we seldom go, you can see the increase from 50% in 2019, then 53% in 2020, now all the way up to 57%. And so, all of a sudden, it's like we were kind of falling down membership-wise, and boy, now there's been like a punch, which is COVID-19. And I think if you're part of a church now, I think most people in churches, you realize like, okay, this COVID-19 adds a new variable or a new situation into the mix here that is exacerbating what was already happening. Wonder if you have any thoughts just about COVID. This is, we're trying to be provocative, but I would say, boy, there's something alarming here.
Oh, yeah. I remember, I'll never forget that call when we were like, hey, we got to, take a break now. We got to shut the church down just in case. And we went to all online. And I don't know if you know, but if these numbers also included online attendance? Yeah.
So the article talks about how they're not sure whether people who are responding are online or not. They're just asking the question, do you regularly attend? So probably we can assume that this includes online attendance, right? Because, I regularly go. I go online.
Yep. And so, it just like what our slogan around the church was like, it's a new normal, right? Like we
Yeah.
kept saying that. And, you know, it's a sad thing to say, but it's become a new normal, and we kind of have to adapt and as the church grow. And I think Bob Crow said it the best, was like it's like a great opportunity for us to branch out and find ways to preach the gospel differently.
No, I mean, I'm glad you're bringing this up. Bob, who's on our staff, we all think this way. You know, you could just look at this with a dour negative, like, oh, the sky's falling. The sky's not falling. Jesus is in control. And I think there's a new opportunity here. And it's best, listen, if you know the gospel, you can't help but be optimistic about the future, because Jesus already tells us, you know, the end of the book, so to speak. We already know how this story ends. But yeah, there's, in the middle of this, as you're trying to be the church, there's something that, you know, you've just got to pay attention to. We'll just add this to it. I mean, I thought this was interesting in the article. The decline in church attendance, they broke it out by demographics. And you can just see it, you know, every age, every ethnicity, whether you're married or single, whether you have kids or you don't have kids, pretty much across the spectrum, church attendance has fallen. And yeah, there you have it. It's stark. You know, I thought maybe it's worthwhile, Jake, to just talk about, you know, you can talk about the entire, you know, North American Christianity, or we could just look at our own neck of the woods. So we happen to belong to a denomination, the Christian Reformed Church in North America. And I happen to just keep track of statistics. Part of this is that we have the Center for Church Renewal that Multiply 222 runs as one of our ministries that's trying to address this very thing. But we've just been keeping track for really the last 25 years, what's happening to church attendance. And, you know, I have 3 charts. In our denomination, there are regions called classes. And these classes are, you know, geographically all over North America. And what's interesting is that you can track the decline in pretty much every classes or every region. It's very consistent. As we kind of scroll through these slides, you'll see that, you know, in each area of the country, you see nothing but red numbers. There's been decline. And in fact, there's only just a couple of places where you have a black number, and it just so happens down here in Florida and classes Southeast U.S., we happen to be one of just 2 black numbers across our entire denomination. By black numbers, what I mean is that we actually, in the last 5 years, had growth rather than decline. But, you know, setting that aside, if you look at the denomination as a whole, and you see this on the bottom of the third of these graphics, we've declined by just over 24,000 people just in the last 5 years, which is just a little more than 10%. Our denomination has declined just a little more than 10% in the last 5 years. And I think this is the case, that these statistics really haven't grappled with what we just talked about last, COVID. I think actually COVID will finally, when this shakes out, we'll realize that we lost even more. But at the very least, COVID, not COVID, we know that in just the last 5 years, not counting what's happened before, and there's been, you know, if you look at this chart, we were at 290,000 members across the United States and Canada back in 1996. And then that dropped in 2006 to 272,000. And then in 2016, it dropped again to 235,000. And now we're down to 211,000. There was already a drop, but the drop has accelerated just in the last 5 years. I wonder if you have any thoughts. I mean, these graphics are a lot to look at. And, you know, if you happen to be in the Christian Reformed Church, you might want to pause the video at various different places so you could take in what's happening in your region of North America. Anyway, Jake, I wonder if you have any thoughts.
I said it before, you know, seeing it charted out is really like jarring. And 25 years, like that's a little bit less than I've been alive. So
okay, right.
It's crazy. Like my generation then hasn't been at church at all. In that, if this chart, I mean, they are right. I love that you keep these records and stuff, because it's good to go back and see like, hey, what's working, what's not.
Right.
But I think, I know we talked about it before, like there's probably 2 things that might be going on is like people are disinterested in church over this 25-year period, or we're not doing something right, or we're doing something wrong at least.
Okay, that's a great point. Let's just talk about that because, now here's the question. Why? Are people less spiritual now or less spiritually interested? Have people just fundamentally changed? Or, has the church failed to respond? Is there something in our operating system that needs adjusting? And, I think for the most part, people have not changed. God made us as spiritual and physical people. I think the basic issues that you face in life are the same. Now, there's been cultural shifts here and there, but I think, it's this other thing that I'm more interested in talking about. We've got to address the operating system of the church. And here's what my proposal to everyone. There's something in the modern operating system that needs upgrading. The legacy way of the way that we've been doing it, relying on, superstar Christians and drawing people into crowds. There's just something about that that's not working. And so we need to overhaul the system. We need to upgrade the system. And, my proposal is that, the upgrade is actually a return to an ancient system, gospel-centered disciple making, where ordinary people are empowered by the Spirit and are sent out, and multiplication. I just think multiplication is something the church today doesn't know about, doesn't talk enough about, and we just don't believe it, that individual ordinary people can be used by God and empowered by His Spirit to begin to multiply. And anyway, here's what I'm trying to tell people. We've got to take gospel-sized, imperfect action. Might not be right. We might get some things wrong, but we can't, one thing you could do, Jake, you get immobilized by fear. You could get immobilized by, oh no, we don't want to mess it up even more than it is. Hey, we've got to move forward, and we're going to know the end of the story. Christ wins, and so we've got to find a way to charge forward. Wonder if you have any thoughts about taking gospel-sized and perfect action.
You said it perfectly. We know the end of the story. As Christians, we know in the end, Christ is going to come out victorious. He already has. So what's stopping you? I think that's the biggest thing, is just that call to action. Hey, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah. And I suggest let's do something. We've got to empower people in disciple making. And if you're listening in, you want to know more, we're just about to talk about what happened just this last week. There's a multiplication movement that we're advocating for, that we've got going. We'd love for you to learn more about it. So make sure to get in touch with us. Like, comment, share. Let us hear from you. Anyway, Jake, let's move on to our next segment, the tipping point. Here we go. All right, each week we take the opportunity to give an update on what's been happening in our multiplication movement. Today, I'm pleased to let you know we've added just this week 10 new disciples. I'm just blown away week after week after week. More and more people are coming into the system. You can just see how God is, He's using this to multiply His kingdom. The Spirit's working. And anyway, let's take the opportunity to welcome everyone. First of all, Mark Rockwell, who's being discipled by Tom Seal. Art Rogers, who's being discipled by Jeff Huntley. Grace Little, who's being discipled by Missy Huntley. Junior Bayona, who's being discipled by Aaron Mamuyak. Keith Smith by Stephen Quick. Michelle Lilly being discipled by Adam Skolnick. Ben Straight is being discipled by Chad Skurr. Eric Plumer by Chris Cassis. Jason Curry by Gerald Bell. And Jillian German by Zach Toth. Now, just love it. Mark, Art, Grace, Junior, Keith, Michelle, Ben, Eric, Jason, Jillian. Just so happy to welcome you. We're excited about what God's going to do in your life and eager for what comes next. To all those who are the disciple makers, Tom, Jeff, Missy, Aaron, Stephen, Adam, Chad, Chris, Gerald, Zach, just excited about how God's using you. Thank you so much for extending yourself and giving yourself away to others. Want a couple other acknowledgments here. We have 2 first-time disciple makers, Stephen Quick and Gerald Bell, and then 1 first-time multiplier, Josh Sackrowitz. And actually, in the next segment, we're going to interview Josh Sackrowitz. Great interview we're about to have. And so looking forward to that. But Josh, so pleased about how God's using you and excited that you've become a multiplier. And then 2 people are celebrating the 10 milestone. This means that there's 10 people in their network overall. Jeff Huntley and then Zach Toth. Awesome. Great job, everybody. So pleased to see how God's working through you. And then 2 people were celebrating the 30 milestone, Bill Witt and Corey Van Huysen. Both of you really doing great things for God's kingdom. And it's amazing how God, over the course of time, as you've just poured into a few people's lives, has spread that out and multiplied it. And so we're celebrating with you. This is a legacy in Christ's kingdom. And so great job. This brings our total number of disciples made into this multiplication system, 633, and growing all the time. Anyway, that ends this segment, and now we're going to move into the next segment called Ordinary People. Let's go. All right, everybody, I'd like to welcome to the show today Josh Sackrowitz. Josh, welcome. What I'd like to do is I'd like to just begin by having you tell your story. This is a segment that we call Ordinary People. And, I always tell all our guests, not that I think you're just ordinary, you're extraordinary in your own way. But one of the things I want to just let people know is that the Christian movement, it doesn't require superstar, unusual, unique people. Disciple making is something that is done by ordinary, everyday Christians. So I'd like to just start with your story. You've been a Christian now for about 1.5 years. And maybe you can just tell me a little bit about your life, your story, and how is it that you became a Christian?
So, to your point, by the way, I am an ordinary person with an extraordinary opportunity.
That's awesome.
That's the way
Love
I look
it.
at it. From about 13 to about 42, I would say I wouldn't say I was an atheist, but I was definitely agnostic. I didn't know what I believed, where I fell in the faith spectrum, if you will.
Gotcha.
But I do know that I believed that there was something. I just didn't know who, what, where, when, and why. And I really wasn't searching either. I just knew that growing up Jewish after my bar mitzvah, I didn't necessarily agree with being Jewish and whatnot, but for family's sake, I always followed the traditions and so on and so forth.
So there was some kind of cultural or just family background that was there that informed your life, but it really didn't mean a lot to you.
Yes. It always felt kind of far away. I'm very involved with the youth group now. And I always tell them, especially because I could see it in their eyes, like at that age, when you read the Bible and you read the stories and you hear the stories, we're separated from Jesus by how many years, and then separated from the Old Testament by how many years. So it always just seems very far away. It isn't until you're able to put it into a today's perspective that you're able to really kind of connect the dots. And that's kind of what happened with me.
Let's, from 13 until now you're in your 40s, what happened? Because suddenly Christ broke through.
A lot of things happened. One of them was Rosie, my wife. She's Christian, was raised Christian, but she was smart enough to know me and know that if she pushed me, I'd push back and get further away as opposed to coming closer. Mm-hmm. But she always, planted little seeds here and there, like, hey, you just need to have faith, or hey, wouldn't you like to pray about it? Things like that, but never like pushy. My children are a big factor because they came here to VPK.
All right, so they came to our church's school for preschool.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, they came to Sunlight VPK, and Ava came to kindergarten, and they'd come home so infectiously positive, and they'd be singing all of the fun songs, and like you name it. And me being a typical dad, I just trying to be involved in their lives.
Yeah.
It just made me question, made me curious.
Something was starting to appeal to you.
Yes.
Okay.
Very much so. And then here comes COVID, and everybody has so many negative things to say about COVID. Here's my positive spin on COVID. If it wasn't for that, they wouldn't have done virtual VBS that year.
Mm-hmm.
And because virtual VBS, it was all done on the computer, and I had lost my job because of COVID, so I was home.
Okay.
So we, as a family, sat down and did the VBS things together, the games, the dances, the everything. And then by the end of it, the very last day, I turned to my wife and I'm like, I kind of miss this. This was so much fun. I'm kind of going to miss this. I think I'd like to get more involved with the church.
Okay.
Naturally, in her head, she's doing backflips and cartwheels and all kinds of stuff. But quietly, she's like, okay, and who knew what that would look like? But fast forward now to a few months later, they started doing Sunlight started doing the youth group again, and friends of ours, the Apples, said, "Hey, you really should introduce Josh to Adam Skolnick." And they would get along famously. Their personalities are very similar, and they have an interesting background similarity, is they were both raised Jewish,
right,
and came to Christ. So my wife introduced me, and we started doing lunch every week. And it just started with, sitting down, having lunch, talking about Jesus. And he had a lot of answers to a lot of questions that I couldn't understand or figure out. One of my biggest hangups, and I can't figure out why, I never associated myself with being Jewish, but I couldn't leave that past behind me. And I felt like it was closing a door and disrespecting my family to become a Christian. And I just couldn't figure out why. So Adam was able to direct me in the right direction, or point me in the right direction rather, and answer a lot of questions for me. And similar to that of like maybe Nicodemus in when he's having that conversation with Jesus about being born again, I too felt like, what does it mean to be born again? Like I didn't understand it. And then it just clicked one day. And Adam kept saying it, and it's true. You're no longer, it's not closing the book. It's not closing the doors. You're actually just continuing the story from the next chapter. Where the Jewish religion leaves off in the Bible, it's like a giant cliffhanger. Now I'm excited to get to the end of the story to find out more about it. And it piqued my curiosity. And then the next thing I know, he asked me if I'd like to be discipled. So it went from just meeting for lunch every week to meeting for discipleship. And I really got to know and understand not just more about Jesus, not just more about the Bible, but I really got to know and understand Adam and build and foster a relationship with Adam, that mentor-mentee relationship. And it has been one of the most powerful relationships I've had in a long, 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 long time. And he is absolutely my I'm not theological mentor, if you will, for lack of a better term. And he's been an amazing blessing to my life. And I thank Jesus daily for the things that he's been able to teach me and help me with in understanding and whatnot. And then the very last thing in the 222, one of the lessons is not the last thing. I guess it would be the first. One of the first things is not wanting to be the end link in the chain.
Yeah. So let's talk about it, because I'd like to just pause and, here's a little bit of the story. And, if Jake puts in he may even put in some B-roll, but maybe, a year ago, we started thinking about how do we let people know about 222 Disciple and the kind of impact it makes. And we just had a great example here in our church, which is I discipled a couple of people, Aaron and then Jason. And Jason and Aaron each had a role in Adam's life. Aaron was really the person who he took Adam out to lunch. And as you mentioned, Adam had this background and, with the Jewish faith, and slowly but surely came to Christ. And then Jason started a formal 222 discipling relationship with him and started meeting with him one-on-one. And one of the things that we stress is, as you just said, don't be the last link in the chain. That we're going to find reliable people who will pass the faith to a next generation, and the next generation after that. And so Adam, who had come to Christ and was excited about that, decided, all right, now I'm going to disciple Josh. And you had just begun going through this discipling relationship, and we made a little video about this. And I just thought, that's something, you see the chain in real life, but now you knew you weren't supposed to be the last link in the chain, and that God was, it wasn't just that you were receiving something, but having received it, you're called to go and give and be a disciple maker. And I know now you've taken on, I think, right, 3 different disciples. So you've been a Christian for now a year and a half. Maybe you've been discipled for a little over a year, but you've taken on 3 disciples, which have been very profound. I know those relationships are real. And now one of your disciples just took on a disciple. In our segment, which we just had, we congratulated you for becoming a multiplier. And I think that's amazing. Here you are, been a Christian for a year and a half period of time. God's already multiplying his kingdom through your disciple-making efforts. Anyway, talk a little bit about what that was like to now move to being a disciple maker and not be the last link in the chain.
So that's where that extraordinary opportunity I spoke about earlier comes in. So I knew of Steve Quick, my first true disciple, but I never really got to know him. Not to say that he was closed off or wasn't welcoming to, but, typical guy thing, we don't get to know each other. So I got asked if I would like to disciple Steve because we knew each other. And Jason, I believe, thought it would make an excellent relationship. And we started meeting every Sunday after church, right after fellowship. And we just started talking and going through the 222. And the more I got to know him, the more the relationship started to grow. And the more I realized that, me and Steve have a lot in common, and we were able to help each other in so many ways and grow that relationship, not just with each other, but with Jesus, because he knew things about the Bible that I didn't. He knew things about the scriptures that I didn't. And I knew things through going through the lessons through the 222 that he didn't know. And that is one of the most amazing things about the way the 222 is set up, is you don't have to be like a professionally trained master's or doctorate. You could be a baby Christian like myself and still have something to bring to the table.
Oh, absolutely.
I just learned that there's so many different perspectives and things that you could look at, different angles that you could look at things. And then when you're talking it out, you see the other person's point of view and the other person's perspective, and you have so much more to learn and teach.
Yeah, that's great. Josh, this is just so exciting. And I mean, I can hear the passion in your voice and the pleasure that you have in what God's done in your life, what Jesus has done in your life, and how he's now using you. I just sense it, and it's infectious. Suppose there's someone listening in, and they're saying to themselves, how do I become a part of this? Or what would that look like? Do you have any advice for somebody who's just considering, like, hey, maybe this is something I want to be a part of?
Stop considering. Don't think about it. Just do it. It is so beneficial, so worth it. I mean, if you think about the relationship that you're missing out on with Christ, it's not worth waiting. It really isn't. And if you're nervous or scared or, shy, what better way to help you through those issues than to talk with somebody about Christ? And I find that is one of the things that most people are like, nowadays, they're kind of scared to talk about.
Yeah.
And this makes it easy.
Take some gospel-sized imperfect action, get out there and just go for it. Anyway, Josh, thank you so much for joining us today. Really, this was a great conversation. I appreciate you taking your time. For everybody, just so glad that you've tuned in. As always, it's been good to be together, and we'll see you next week. Hey, thanks so much for tuning in to the Disciple Standard Podcast. We're so glad you joined us. We encourage you to continue the conversation by joining us on social media. Also, if you want to learn more about the Multiply method or learn about how to take the Multiply pledge, we encourage you to join us on our website at multiply222.com. Have a great day.